Hello, dear listener. Welcome to my little book nook. I am Bruce Boinkers. It has been so long since I've actually read something, hasn't it? Life does get in the way, and it does try very, very hard to make it so that I cannot read this one. But after today, that will change. Today, I will be reading 9, The Saviour Returns, Chapter 1, Nightmares and Moving On. His legs ached, his artificial lungs now burned, his heart was pounding so hard it felt as if it would soon beat itself out of his chest. The burning cathedral seemed miles upon miles away. He couldn't reach it fast enough. No matter how fast he was running, no matter how hard his feet were pounding the earth below, however, he could clearly see the sky-licking fire coming from the church off in the distance, illuminating the inky night sky. Over hills, past broken wheels and splintering wood, he ran. He ran until he finally infiltrated the cathedral. The cold night air was quickly replaced by burning smoke and a dancing inferno. He didn't slow, however. He dodged the flames, time running short. He ran through the cathedral that he once called home. I'm going to retry that paragraph. Over hills, past broken wheels and splintering wood, he ran. He ran until he finally infiltrated the cathedral. The cold night air was quickly replaced by burning smoke and a dancing inferno. He didn't slow, however. He dodged the flames, time running short. He ran through the cathedral that he once called home, racing through room after room. The blaze obscured his vision as he searched the church desperately. He needed to find them. He needed to, before it happened, before history repeated itself. He could hear the screams of each stitchpunk all around him. It was as if they were everywhere, and their cries surrounded him, yet no matter where he looked, he still couldn't find them. The screams he heard were all out of fear, out of rage, pain, and hurt, as the souls were sucked from there. His friends, though those who were dead, were dropped to the floor, bodies limp and lifeless. Thirsty for more souls, it pounced for its next victim. It was his fault. Everything was. He woke the monster, and now it was coming to kill them all. Each and every one. They would never be freed now. He was badly burned all over his body, and thoroughly exhausted, he finally reached the place where he knew the massacre of his coven was taking place. It was situated in a large room of sorts. Long wooden benches were piled against the walls. Nothing more than splintering and blazing wreckage. A beautiful stained glass window of a male angel decorated one wall. He skidded to a stop on the burned, blackened wooden floor, and gasped in horror, his eyes widening as he looked upon the horrible sight. The fabrication machine was full of life, and no longer dead, lying out in the emptiness. It was roaring in triumph as it dropped a body from its razor-sharp clutches. The sparks of life surrounded its gleaming crimson-red eye, body illuminated by fire. He saw that the body it had dropped was one of the twins. Four was dead. His small, innocent spirit now absorbed into the machine. His small, lifeless body fell onto the ground, where he lay limp, next to his dead brother 3. As he saw this, he gasped as he now saw the entire scene. His heart broke. 2 was lying on his side, the frail elder broken. 1 was lying sprawled on his back, a few inches away from 8. The guardian had obviously tried to save his leader. He failed in doing so, obviously, as he was laying on his chest dead, his mouth gaping grotesquely wide. His outstretched fingers nearly touched 1's arm. 6 was laying crumpled on one side. He was covered in ink from his broken fingers. 5 was nearest to him, eye patch burned through, reflecting the image of the last time he was killed. He laid sprawled on his back. He gave a cry of horror as he looked down upon his best friend. Running towards him, he kneeled beside his body. Laying his hand upon Five's chest, he shook from the grief, knowing it was useless to try and wake his friend. His head snapped up to the sound of a familiar battle cry. Seven had her... This chapter is going to kill me. This is going to be the last recording of this chapter, and I'm just going to post it. That is it. Goodness, I have sat here for quite a while, nearly an hour at this point, trying to desperately record this. I will get there. Definitely will get there, okay? Patience, and a little bit of my sanity. But we'll get there. Seven had her skullment bravely pulled over her face, her spear clutched in her hands. Her pale white body was illuminated orange, yellow, and red, tinged with black from the burns she had on her body. She was trying to fight off the fabrication machine, trying to stab the talisman it had mounted upon its chest. The brave and dauntless female Stitchpunk dodged the claws with intrepid grace, her ferocity keeping her alive. She wasn't dead yet. What a thing to think. Oh yes, she isn't dead yet. Let us go. She wasn't dead yet. He wanted to call out to her, then do it. He wanted to call out to her, to tell her not to stab the talisman. He needed it to get the souls back, and to kill the machine. Suddenly, shrieking angrily, the metallic monster overwhelmed her with its claws. It knocked her spear into the fire, and then tripped her. Why not just grab her? Tripping? Okay. And then tripped her. She fell to the ground with a cry. I would too. Oh, goodness. Okay, so here's a part as to why this chapter is taking so long for me to post outside of life being a bitch. I cannot yell and I cannot scream. Like, physically, I can't do it. But I'll give it my best damn try. It's gonna sound stupid and it's gonna sound gay, but I will attempt. And trust me, this character be yelling. No! He yelled. That sucked. I will attempt to edit it to make it louder, but no promises. I will try that sentence again, but I really have no words outside of this to say. I am not good at yelling. I cannot physically yell. I will do my best. No! He yelled, and tried to run towards her, panic more powerful than pain. Not her, not Seven. Please don't kill her, not her, he pleaded, inside his whirling mind. The fire seemed to grow hotter as he tried to run through it. It seemed like he was becoming slower, the harder he tried to reach Seven. His legs ached terribly as he tried to save Seven before he was alone. However, his knees were trembling violently, and they were unable to hold the rest of his body up any longer. The weakness and the pain were overwhelming him. And Sunkiss, if you scratch that trampoline, I am going to flip. Are you going to be a good boy? You know, big stretchy? Okay, buddy. Okay. The fire seemed to grow hot. I was just there. I lost my place because I'm pretty sure y'all heard it. We have this little trampoline we have in our house. I'm currently using as a desk. Sunkiss has decided that it is now a scratching post. You done? You done being silly? You done being goofy? Okay, back to the chapter. I would like to get over chapter 1, Boo-Boo. Can we do that? Can we do that, little Sunny Boo? Yeah? You gonna flop? Okay. My supervisor has flopped. The talisman... I was on a roll before you decided... Goodness, Floof. You have scrambled my brain cells. What do you have to say for yourself? A lot, apparently. The talisman glowed eerily green as the machine held a fiercely struggling, screaming 7 in its iron clutches. 3 long trails of green light burst from the talisman plates. The deadly light struck her, full force in the face. And the deadly light struck her full force in the face. She jerked forward involuntarily as it sucked the living soul out of her. Her spirit right out of her body. Goodness, what a way to go. He collapsed to the ground, incapable of You know what? He collapsed to the ground, incapable of taking another step forward. His eyes widened as he reached for the dying 7. His heartbeats grew slower as he succumbed to the smoke. The billowing flames grew larger. It was killing him. Yes, please do die. This section hurts. I've tried so many times. No! He screamed as flames engulfed him. No! That was the last yell, Boo-Boo. Yay! In an instant, the inferno and sweltering heat were swept away. And so was that whole section. It was replaced by cool night air, a slight breeze flowing through the city. The stars twinkled serenely in the inky night sky. The dead stitch punks, the fire, and the fabrication machine all disappeared as 9 awoke from the nightmare. Ironically, the same amount of attempts that I have done to record this chapter tonight. But I digress. He sat bolt upright. His mechanical heart was beating painfully against his chest. His breathing extremely fast, his shaking fingers were clamped so tight into fists. It was a wonder. It was a baffling wonder. His palms didn't crack. The echo of his screams of no hung in the crisp night air above him, as if he lives in a very dead space. If predators were still around, my dude, you would be dead. He was blinking rapidly, trying to figure out exactly where he was. He was no longer in the burning cathedral, but laying out in the open. Dead 5, dead 7, 7, 9. A voice had been yelling and screaming. The voice that had been yelling and screaming in absolute abject torment and agony. As the machine grabbed her and killed her, asked him, "What whiplash?" He blinked, turning a bit, and faced 7. Her brows were furrowed in worry, and she was sitting up as well. The twins laying beside 7 were looking at him in worry. I would too. This would be baffling. I would be questioning what the fuck this dude is doing up in the middle of the night. Just like how I'm questioning my life decisions at the moment. But we digress. The twins laying beside 7 were looking up at him in worry. Their eyes flickered apprehensively. It appeared that he had woken the 3 with his screams of horror. The twins still lay on the ground, curled up against the cold night breeze. That must suck. Oh, sorry. Oh, Oh, sorry. Okay, buddy. Oh, sorry, he gasped. Averting his eyes, the shock of the dream nearly overwhelmed him as he struggled for a breath that seemed reluctant to fight its way past the panic and alarm. Get over it. It was just a fucking night terror, buddy. Just a fucking night terror. Just go back to bed. Have someone yap at you. Have Seven yap at you. Good grief. I don't know, set fire to something and listen to it. Goodness. It's okay, guys. Go back to sleep, Seven said soothingly to the twins, reaching forward with a hand and stroking their shoulders in reassurance. Oh, that's so lovely. They glanced at one another and conceded. I would concede too. Laying back down, they curled up and closed their eyes. As soon as Seven was sure that the twins were calm and falling back asleep, she turned to Nine. He was rubbing the sides of his optics resignedly, eyes closed, trying to wash the images of the nightmare from his mind. His brow furrowed, his breathing slightly calmer now. It was just a dream, he told himself, just a dream. He and the others were safe. It wasn't real. It was just a dream. Nine? She asked him gently. He sighed and dropped his hands to rest on his knees before turning to face her. I'm sorry I awoke you, he murmured softly. Are the twins okay? I'm fine, and so are the twins, very obviously. But what about you? Are you okay? She asked him. Looking worried, she peered into his face anxiously. He managed to nod, trying to keep the shaking of his hands under control. I'm fine, Seven. It was just a dream. A nightmare, he said. His tense body finally relaxed, and he leaned against the wooden wall behind him. Seven laid a hand on his shoulder in concern. Are you sure you're all right? She asked persistently. I'm fine, he reassured her, reaching up and covering her hand with his own. Seven blinked, looking unconvinced, as I would be too, after he just sat up randomly in the night, screeching no into the nothingness. It's almost as if he isn't a very convincing liar. Keep a pin in it, good readers. He's terrible at lying, but anyways, we digress once more. Seven blinked, looking unconvinced, but then withdrew. She laid back down. She laid back across the ground, closing her eyes and falling asleep once more. Ah, yes, as we do. Her soft, slow breathing filled the desolate silence. Nine watched her and the twins for a moment before he laid back down, staring fixedly at the sky. He looked upon the stars for a moment, sighing to himself. His heart felt like it was ripping in two as he relived the memory of his friend's death, just as he did in the nightmare. Closing his eyes, he too fell asleep, the images of a dead Seven, dead twins, dead Five, dead everyone filling his mind. They were unable to be pushed aside, troubling his sleep for the remainder of the dreadful night. It's almost as if you should just stop thinking about it. You dumbass. You complete idiot. Just go to bed. Go to bed. Sleep. You stupid fuck. The calm shadow of sleep. I don't know how calm it would be after a night terror like that just continues to go on, but the calm shadow of sleep abruptly ended as something shook his shoulder gently, jerking him into awareness. Nine, a familiar voice accompanied the shaking. Come on, it's time to move. All right, he said sleepily. Stretching, he yawned wildly and sat up, pushing himself up off of his side with a hand. I'm up. Well, good morning to you too, Seven teased, smiling gently at him. He blinked and managed to give her a small, tired smile. Good morning, he replied, getting to his feet, stifling another yawn as Seven followed. Where are the twins? They're playing nearby, Seven replied, her brows furrowing and her smile disappearing. She faced Nine. But the one I'm currently worried about is you. You seemed pretty freaked out last night. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Don't worry, Seven, he replied, trying to smile at her again, but finding out he couldn't bring himself to. He turned away, rubbing the back of his head. This chapter is going to kill me. But we digress. You sure? She pressed. Seven, really, I'm sure I'm fine, he said, finally pushing himself to give her a reassuring smile. Maybe if you just stopped fucking lying, you would. To both yourself and to her. Maybe if you just stopped lying, we could move on, but no. But we digress once more. Seven, really, I'm fine, he said, lying. He finally pushed himself to give her a reassuring smile. She sighed in defeat, shaking her head and turning away from him. I would too. Okay, honey, just give up. He's not gonna tell you the truth. We gotta get through this chapter, bud. I don't believe you, you know. I'm going to go get the She's gonna go get the twins. I'm going to go get the twins. I'm going to retry that one. After I slowly lose my mind. I don't believe you, you know. I'm going to go get the twins. I swear, I'm going to get the twins. There we go. Finally, that one sentence. One more time. I don't believe you, you know. I'm going to get the twins, she said, brows knitting in annoyance. I would too. Nine sighed, watching her as she disappeared around the corner to go fetch the two young boys. Closing his eyes for a moment, he jadedly leaned against the wall behind him. He felt a fresh wave of dismay crash upon him as he recollected the horrendous nightmare the night before. Maybe if you just stop giving the thought credence. I will get through this chapter. We will get through this chapter. As infuriating as it is, I will get through this chapter. We will get through this chapter. And once we're done, it's done. I'm going straight to chapter 2. I'm not sitting on chapter 1 anymore. I swear, I have genuinely tried several times throughout several years to get this one chapter done. I will get it done. From the nightmare before. How real it had been. Even the pain and the heat from the fire felt real. Later that day, 9 and 7, does it really matter? I guess it wouldn't. 9 and 7 walking together while the twins were frolicking around. They jumped on and off of rubble and other things strewn all around the ground. All along the ground in this post-apocalyptic wastelandscape. Just imagine these two tiny little motherfuckers just running all over. You know, like small children would. Yep. They frolicked around, they jumped on and off of rubble and other things strewn along the ground, flickering to one another They both flickered to one another excitedly. 9 and 7... Do you see how 7 and 9 smiled and laughed as they both tumbled into one another, falling to the ground and getting themselves back up again, quickly. Their eyes were alit with silent laughter as he watched them play. 9 found himself wishing that the others were here to see the twins' adorable antics as well. The smile slid off his face, and he looked at the ground below him. Motherfucker. I will get through this chapter, but you are not helping. Because I really want to punch you in the face. 9, I know something is bothering you, 7 said, peering into his face, noting his sudden change of mood. He looked up at her, and then averted his eyes once more, ashamed to even look her in the face. He was overwhelmingly reminded that she had once loved them too. It's just hard to live on, while the others are... He trailed off. The sentence hung in the air before he continued. I wish I could just make things right again. Just to have a second chance, he finished softly. Closing his eyes and sighing quietly, he opened his eyes again when 7 gently took his hands into hers. I know, 9. But it will be okay. The others are all right. They're at peace now. And there's nothing we can do. But we still have the twins, and sooner or later we'll have a place to call home. We're safe now, she said. That's what she said. Clutching his hand tighter, he gave an answering, grateful grasp. The two continued to walk together, hand in hand. Dark clouds. Yes, because above us, the dark clouds, they're crowding along the horizon above us. Above them. 7 cast a wary glance up at them before turning back to the young man. Ah, yes, the crowd of dark clouds who was watching the twins play. I think we need a rest tonight. Get down early, 7 said to him. He tore his eyes from the twins and looked at her, a puzzled expression on his face. But we need to find 9 began, sounding worried. I know. We need to find a home, 9, 7 finished. 7 finished. That's it. Chapter done. No, son of a bitch. No, it was just his fucking sentence. I know we need to find a home, 9, 7 said, finishing his sentence, but I don't want to exhaust the twins. We've been getting up at the crack of dawn. We've been getting up at dawn and going to sleep at midnight for over 5 weeks now. Son of a bitch, if that was me, I would be dead. She said, sounding worried about the 2 little ones. Be worried? How the fuck are you 2 doing it? How's the fuck any of them doing it? I digress, she said, sounding a little worried about the 2 little ones. She glanced at them, and 9 did as well. 4 sat down on a torn, tattered book for a moment. The pages were covered in what looked suspiciously like blood. Sorry, that's not what it said, but I'm running with it. The pages were covered in what looked horribly like bloodstains, and he was yawning widely. Ah, yes, the brutally mangled, glorified book. This small child sat upon it and yawned. Yes. 3 was sitting beside him, rubbing his optics and sighing silently. All right, 7, we'll rest longer tonight, he agreed, still watching the 2 small boys, his eyes strangely blank. 7 smiled faintly. "Thank you, Nine," she said, sounding grateful. Nine looked down at her. However far down he could even do so, they're like barely any shorter than the other, but okay. Nine looked down at her. She swore she saw the flicker of a smile pass through his lips. Oh, goodness. The two Stitch Punks continued to watch the twins. Three then took Four's hand, heaving him onto his feet, their weariness pushed aside for a moment as they continued to frolic and play happily, as children should, but okay. The night, yes, the night, the night upon a summer's evening, they stopped to rest once more. They nestled together under a metal overhang, which appeared to be a part of a rusted automobile door. Nine had somehow found some old but clean flannel sheets. They made a little nest in the corner of their shelter, and there they rested. Nine had barely I'm gonna go insane. I promise this. Once this chapter is done, I swear I will take this more seriously. But this has been a thorn in my side for fucking years. I'm gonna get through it. I'm gonna get through it. I swear. I promise. I swear. Nine had taken heed to Seven's words before. Which ones? Okay. And the moon was barely in the sky at this moment. The twins curled up together, already sound asleep. Seven was stretched out at her side, her back against Nine's hip. He, however, was still awake. He should be going to bed. But of course, he's still awake. His knees were held to his chest, his arms crossed over them, his chin on his forearms. He was staring up at the stars through a small hole in the overhang. They sparkled serenely once the clouds from earlier had moved on elsewhere. The half-moon seemed to mirror his heart, half gone, and the remaining half filled with love for the rest of his family. Okay. We're getting there. We're almost there. We're almost... 5, he said softly, not wanting to wake Seven and the twins again. He needed an answer. And his deceased friend was the first to come to mind. He needed help. He needed a lot of help. I don't know what's best. His deceased friend was the first to come to mind. I need help. I need a lot of help. No shit. I don't know what's best. I don't know what to do anymore. Please answer me. He pleaded up to the starry sky, up to the moon. It remained silent. Nine received no reply at all. Not one. Disappointment overtook him. Well, what did you expect? The celestial body to fucking speak? The dead man to speak? Goodness. Disappointment overtook him. For a very long time, he had been longing to talk to 5. It was cruel that someone he had grown so close to in such a short amount of time was ripped away from him so quickly, so soon. Too soon. His eyes seemed heavy. 7 was right. They did need to rest more. He had been pressing them too much. What a stupid leader he made. He was even worse than one had once been. Okay, maybe you're being a little too hard on yourself. I don't know if you can do any worse than a fucking dictator. But anyways, he thought to himself. He laid down, resting his aching joints. A low metallic creaking noise broke the silence as he stretched out his legs. He was still quite new to the world, and all of this traveling without much rest took a toll on his body. 9 glanced at 7 and raised a hand. He slightly touched her elbow. She was too deeply asleep to acknowledge this simple but tender touch. 9 vaguely wondered if she had simply fallen asleep next to him, or if it was on purpose. Okay, buddy. Nine was forever grateful that Seven was still his friend after all he had done to her coven. How much pain he had caused her, he withdrew his hand and looked back at the stars. They were still silent. He knew they were never going to answer him. Sighing sadly, he closed his eyes slowly, the warmth from Seven's body making him all the more tired. He was quickly thrust into a quiet sleep. And that was Chapter 1 of 9 The Saviour Returns. Pain in my ass. That is what I'm going to rename this chapter. Pain in my ass. This is 1 of 30. Okay? 1 of 30. It's done. It's over. I don't care about the quality of this particular recording as long as it is listenable to you, the dear viewer. Dear viewer, as long as it's enjoyable to you, it's still listenable. My absolute sanity has been destroyed by this chapter. But I digress. Once more, I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Perhaps this one will be accompanied by Chapter 2. Hopefully, we can take it a bit more seriously. But Chapter 1 is a pain in my ass. And now it is over. Several years' worth of my sanity being slowly chipped away at because this one chapter, this one particular chapter, okay? Done and over with. We're not coming back to it. We are moving forward, okay? We are moving forward from this particular chapter, okay? I might join this with Chapter 2 when I record it. Hopefully in the future, when you're watching this, it's already done. Poof! Great. Grand. But it's 1:47, nearly 2 in the morning for me. So we'll see about that. But first, I gotta get this particular recording done and over with. Okay? Okay. And welcome back, dear listener. We are finally at Chapter 2. After getting a nice little snack and some coffee, all nice and snug, I am ready to read Chapter 2. And you, dear listener, I hope you are also snug, wherever you may be, with some water, perhaps some tea, all nice and cozy, with maybe a snack to get you through this particular chapter. Now, we are going to try and be a bit more serious with this particular chapter, but there is no guarantee that it will be without commentary. There was a dark, quiet world surrounding him. At first he couldn't understand where he was, or what he was doing. It felt as if he was taking his first breaths of life again. Back then he didn't know where he was. More importantly, what or who he was. But now he knew that he was a sentient being, a little rag doll, and his name was 9. However, knowing these things didn't help him to understand where he was now. For you see, he was definitely standing on a solid surface. So, he was more than a memory, more than some disembodied thought, but he looked down at his copper feet. There was nothing underneath him, as if he was standing upon glass. 9 was quickly becoming frightened, and he looked out into the emptiness that surrounded him, looking for something, anything that he could recognize. "Hello," he called out to the blankness hesitantly. He wondered if there was anyone besides himself occupying this strange world, perhaps something that could answer him and tell him where he was, yet there could be something deadly out there. Everything was a swirling dark blue-gray mist. The only answer was the echo of his voice reverberating back to him from unseen walls or hills or whatever was hidden within the odd world. It was as if he had been sucked out of existence itself, like he had never been real. But that couldn't be right. He was just with Seven and the twins. Where were they? He couldn't be alone, or was he? 9? deep, familiar voice said softly, in the vast blue-gray void. 9 was startled by the sudden noise. He whirled all around, searching desperately for the voice, relieved to know that he wasn't trapped here alone. Perhaps the voice or its owner could tell him where he was or what had happened to 7, 3, and 4. If he had a heartbeat here, it would be increasing in speed. However, he had no heartbeat. It was as if he was something more than a spirit, but less than a living, solid being. 9 couldn't see any other being within this world. He was still alone. But perhaps the voice didn't want to show itself. Perhaps it was merely waiting until his back was turned. Who's there? He yelled back to the voice, ready to run from any threat, his body tensing. 7, 3, 4? No, it's me, the voice replied to 9, who was still whirling around trying to find the twins, 7 and the owner of the mysterious voice. The voice seemed to only... Here we go. The voice seemed to be the only thing in this world, this strange place. It had replaced 7 and the twins. What have you done with them? 9 demanded, still tense. His fists were clenched. He was no longer ready to run, but ready to fight for 7 and the small boys. Nothing, they're fine. It's all right, I'm not going to hurt you, the voice said gently. 9 could picture a calming hand held out to him. The voice sounded vaguely familiar, but who did it belong to? It was reassuring and calm. But not too deep. But not older than his own. 9's eyes widened as he froze, as he listened to the echo of the voice. It was a voice he had been wishing to hear for 3 months, hoping, pleading. 5? He whispered, looking over his shoulder, his breaths becoming shallowed and frightened. 9 was no longer tense, but it seemed like all of his insides had melted into useless liquid metal. In the swirling mass, in the darkness of the misty realm, a sudden bright green light. A sudden bright green light stood out unmistakably against the dark colors. One 9 had failed to see in his desperation and fright for his missing friends. The wisp of smoke took a shape and rotated slowly. It turned to... We're going to try that one again. The wisp of smoke took a shape and slowly rotated. It turned into a small male rag doll, sporting a single eye, 2 buttons on his chest, and a number hovering up from his back. My brain cells, they're dying. You wake up in a small world between life and death, and you see your dead best friend. What do? The wisp of smoke took shape and rotated slowly. It turned into a small male rag doll, sporting a single eye, 2 buttons on his chest, and a number hovering above his back. He touched down to the indistinct land beneath him with an unrealistic grace. It was so very odd to see 5 move with such elegance. He was normally so clumsy and inept. Of course, when you are in limbo, you can do anything. A characteristic 9 shared with him. He walked slowly to 9. The other male ragdoll had collapsed from alarm and shock at seeing him, someone he was sure he'd never see again. 5, he whispered again. He almost took a step away, but something powerful held him there. rooting him to the very spot where he stood on trembling knees, his eyes wide. "Yeah, it's me. I'm here," the spirit replied, giving a small, gentle smile. Only it wasn't verbal, but it was his thoughts that Nine heard. As an experiment, Nine thought back. "Where am I? Where are Seven and the twins? They're fine. They're back home in your... They're fine. They're back home. You're in the world between, Nine," Five answered, drifting downward, sitting on his knees. Nine followed him, unable to stand any longer. The shock overwhelmed him as his eyes searched Five's pale green face. He looked at every single facial feature that had been etched into the soul from when Five was alive. He looked exactly the same. He looked exactly like the man Nine had missed so much. The chill of the world was sending odd, unpleasant sensations throughout his body, and it made him shiver. "The world between. Where is that?" he asked when he found his voice once more, or rather his thoughts. "It's where we are," Five answered solemnly, looking up to the sky above them. Nine followed his gaze. He gave a small gasp, giving another shudder. "We'll get through. We'll do it. We're getting through it. We're getting through it. We have progression." "It's where we are," Five answered, solemnly looking up to the sky above them. Nine followed his gaze. He gave a small gasp, giving another shudder, though he was unsure why they frightened him. He shouldn't have been. He knew them. He had known them for the very first days of his life. Pretty sure Five's a dude, but okay. Hovering above him and Five were the four wisps of green smoke. They didn't have a very distinct shape and were unclear, however Nine could tell them apart. Each face, each stitch punk running through his mind. One was thin, with a gaunt face. 8, of course, was the largest. 2 was rather hunched over, and he was the smallest. And 6 had wild, crazy hair along with 2 mismatched eyes. He wanted to cry out to them, to embrace them all and tell them he was sorry, but something held him back in doing so. Instead, he tore his gaze away from them. "Why am I here?" Nine thought, looking back at Five and blinking in confusion. Five actually smiled, his face becoming much softer. At this smile, Nine felt more comfortable. But only just. He missed that smile. He missed Five. "Well, you asked me to answer you, didn't you?" he said softly, still smiling widely. Nine blinked, realizing that back on Earth he had asked towards the sky for Five to answer him, and had Five really heard him? Had they all heard what he had said over these past months, when he would lie and talk to the sky, attempting to get an answer that he was never sure to come to him? I'm going to attempt that sentence again. Had they all heard what he had said over these past months, when he would lie and talk to the sky, attempting to get an answer that he was never sure to come to him? Five turned sober again, blinking and looking down for a moment before continuing. Nine felt anxious again as he bent down slightly and looked into Five's face. "Nine, we need your help. All of us," Five said, looking back up to Nine, waving a hand to the spirits around him. Around them, to the spirits for which were around them and above them. They didn't move, but they seemed to hover closer, their voices either lost or distant. Me? Nine stammered, growing more anxious with each slow second he was there. Time seems like an unreal thought here. Was he even really here? Would he ever return to Seven or the twins? Or was this a dream? All these questions soared around in his mind, unable to be answered. He attempted to push them away so he could concentrate on what Five was saying. Yes, you see, we're not really free. We're sort of trapped. For you see, we are actually sort of trapped, Five said, looking sadly down once more, and at first Nine couldn't compel his mind to register the statement. He stared fearfully at a somber Five for a moment, before he managed to think once more. Trapped? How? Nine said, suddenly apprehensive. He now felt rather uncomfortable, with the 4 other silent spirits hovering above them, watching him, listening. Well, we haven't been able to move on to where we're supposed to be in the land beyond, Five said, looking distressed for an unexplained reason. His lower lip quivered, and he wrung his green hands together. Why? Why haven't you been able to move on? Nine asked, softly, raising his eyebrows in surprise, and yet more worry. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Well, we're still needed on Earth, Five said. Nine shook his head, wondering vaguely if his hearing sensors were in need of repair, or if his mind was going on him. No, we're fine. I'm just trying to get us to a new home. I didn't want you to. Just go, move on, be at peace. Please, Nine pleaded. He believed that Five was trapped because of Nine's want for his best friend, his need for the guidance that he had asked for. Five put a reassuring, transparent hand on his shoulder. Nine's heart, wherever it was, swelled with pain at this touch. It reminded him of what seemed so long ago. It's not you, Nine. You saved us and released us, but our mission isn't finished. There are still things we need to do. We've been trapped because we haven't been able to go back, he said soothingly to the younger Stitch Punk. But looking down quite miserably. Go back? Come back to life? Nine asked, feeling weak. Come back, the only words he could think of. Come back? Yes, and now that you're finally here, there may be a way for us to come back, Five said, gently taking Nine's hand in his. They felt like ice, and an unpleasant sensation slipped up Nine's arm. However, he didn't withdraw away from Five. Instead, he looked intently at him, trying to steady his trembling breaths. How? Nine asked, slightly leaning towards Five. The talisman, Five said, looking pointedly at Nine's zipper. Nine removed his hands from Five's. He hesitantly clutched the zipper and pulled down, reaching inside his own body. I question where his guts may be, but remembering they don't have any. Anyways, he hesitantly clutched his zipper and pulled down. Reaching inside his own body, Nine brought out the talisman, an object he had been carrying inside him ever since he had released the souls. Nine looked up at Five once more, and strangely the talisman hummed mechanically, as if it sensed where it was. The talisman wasn't designed for one thing, Nine. It took the souls from the scientist. It gave us our souls, and then it took them, and then it released us, Five explained, putting his hands on the talisman as Nine held it out to him. It could pull us back from the world between, into our bodies. We'd come back home, he said, taking one of Nine's fingers and guiding it across the talisman. To each symbol key, Nine watched intently, etching the sequence into his mind. This sequence will summon us back to our bodies, 5 said, letting Nine's hand go. 9 gazed at him, so many questions filling his mind. How'd you know? Months ago. I'm not even sure how long ago it was. Someone came to us in this world. He told us why we were here. He told us why we were trapped and why we couldn't move on. He showed me the sequence and told me that you needed to come and help get us home because if you didn't, then we'd be trapped here forever, 5 said softly. 9 looked down at the talisman, his brows furrowed. He thought deeply at this. So much could go wrong, so much could happen. He could type in the sequence wrong. He could find or heal their bodies. So much joy could take away the horrible grief. This could just be a dream. Is this reality? Is this real? Are you really trapped? 9 asked, looking up at 5 once more. If he brought back beings that were already at peace, then they would be despondent. They weren't meant to come back to Earth. Then again, he'd have his best friend back, and the guilt would lift. This could be a dream. He could be dreaming that he could have 5 back. His mind could be twisting it to please his already broken heart. Yes, this is real. Please listen. Please help us. 5's voice began to fade. Slowly, as he stared into 9's eyes, looking like he was going to cry at any given moment. Then many different voices reached 9, voices he easily recognized, voices he missed exceedingly, soft, grizzled, light, deep. Please help us. Please bring us back. Want to go home, not free. Home. 5 closed his eyes. 5 closed his eye and peered at his friend. 9 closed... Here we go again. 5 closed his eyes. 9 peered at his friend. His anxiety increased tenfold as he looked upon 5's despondent face. Something was wrong. 5, he asked softly. The spirit looked up at him. You have to go back, he said quietly. He stood up, closed his eye, and bowed his head. 5 turned his back on a stunned and dumbstruck 9 without a goodbye. No, 5, wait, don't go yet, please, 9 pleaded, verbally this time. He thrust the talisman back into his chest, zipped himself up, and ran after 5. He had already taken flight, and seemed not to hear 9. 5 and the 4 others had turned back into 5 wisps of smoke, and were gliding off into the distance. Their lights growing smaller and smaller by the second, 9 tried to chase after them. Here we go again. Like sick animals, we play pretend. However, there was something suddenly pulling on him. It was as if someone had seized his shoulders and was pulling him down to the ground with an exceeding force. Weak with fright and distress, 9 succumbed to the pull, his hands still extending to the wisps that were now gone, the blue-gray swirling world disappearing quickly, and 9 knew he was now falling as the ground beneath him was suddenly gone. He was flying, falling through mid-air, through nothingness. His chest constricted so tightly he couldn't gather enough air to scream. He closed his eyes, waiting for the jarring impact on a surface below. He gasped as reality crashed upon him. He bolted upright, his blinking rapid and shallow, and his entire body vibrating. He blinked, staring at the ground for a moment as he tried to gather his bearings. Then he sighed. Breaking my mind. Breathing the crisp, cool night air in deeply, he finally saw that he could be back in the world, that he was indeed back in the world he was born into. So you're alive again. Congratulations, you came out of limbo. Instead of the cold, unpleasant sensation he had been feeling, 'cause you were in limbo. His left side felt extremely warm in the coolness of the night. He slumped back down to lay on his back. It was so real. The dream was so real. He laid there, staring up into the inky night sky above him. The blue-white light of the moon reflecting off the glass coverings of his optics. He quickly checked to see if Seven and the twins were still asleep, and was relieved to see that they were, and that he hadn't woken them. All 3 were breathing soundly, their bodies relaxed, eyes closed, and their dreams untroubled. Seven shifted beside him. And their dreams untroubled, Seven shifted beside him in her sleep, curling further into his side. And he gratefully welcomed her warmth. It tethered him back to... IT. I misread that as IT. Yes, international technology. Internet technologies tethered him back down to Earth. It tethered him back down to Earth. This ethereal it tethered him back, for which reality shall show. Yes. 9 lay thinking hard about it all. My brain cells are dying. My brain cells, come back. Come back. We must finish this chapter. 9 lay thinking hard about it all. It was just too real. Upon this matter, he could not question his sanity. My eyeballs are wigging out. And that is why this one paragraph keeps Come on, eyeballs, you can do it. 9 lay thinking hard about it all. It was just too real. Upon this matter, he could not question his sanity. The dream had been too extensive, too genuine to be considered one of his normal dreams or nightmares. He realized they had to have taken his essence, his mind, not his soul, to the world between, to speak to him. While he was still asleep and they were trapped, they weren't free as he had thought they were. 9 thought about 5. He could come back. He had spent so little time with him, although in the course of about 10 minutes, they had become inseparable. And then 5 was ripped away from him a second time. He remembered standing there, staring at his inert, lifeless body, a thin line of smoke rising from it. He was paralyzed with shock and grief that his best friend, that was his best friend, and he had just watched him die. He was painfully reminded that 5 died because of him, because of his mistake. They had all died. It was his fault. 9 sighed, folding his hands over his chest, hoping for sleep to find him again. He wanted to somehow believe he was... My eyes be wigging out, my bros. My eyes be wigging out. 9 sighed. I sigh. 9 sighed, folding his hands over his chest, hoping for sleep to find him again. He wanted to somehow believe he wasn't there, so he wouldn't be troubled about them any longer. However, he found he couldn't stop thinking about the sequence of symbols the spirit of 5 had shown him. As he folded his hands together, he found that they were both ice cold. Oh, goodness. So, that was chapter 2. As you can tell, my brain cells are thoroughly burnt to a crisp as I try to read it. My eyeballs are wigging out. It's like 2:19 in the morning. I am tired. I'm gonna go rest. I hope today is good for you. I hope you sleep well. And I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna go to bed. I'm gonna go eepy. I'm gonna go eepy weepy. And we're all gonna go eepy weepy and have a good eepy weepy together. Yeah? Good eepy weepies? Good eepy weepies. I go to sleep. My throat hurts. My eyes hurt. My brain hurts. It all hurts. If I could, I'd punch 9 in the mouth right now, but okay. Good night, everybody. I'm going to the world in between. Goodbye.